Excellent. So yesterday we had a fantastic talk on setting as a CDO. You may have seen the LinkedIn post where you've joined a company as a CDO and it's your first 90 days. Some people call it first 100 days, first 90 days. And at the end of that 90 days, you've got to start laying down a vision and strategy. And one of the areas that the data professional suffers from is having the vision coming down from the top, that people buy into it and they see the vision and then they connect themselves to that vision. So that was a challenge now. And because we had this discussion yesterday, I brought some of it into this meeting just to give you guys an idea of a sample vision, a sample data vision. Happy to chat that through with you and to take you through that journey. But then it's almost a case of, well, what happens after that strategy and vision has been set? Where as data management professionals do we line up with this thing? And how do we connect? So that's what today's discussion is going to be. As always, happy for you to jump and shout and scream and wave your hands if need be. And let's see what we can talk about. So those were the first three introductory slides. Wanted to share this with you before we go into the strategy definition or the vision on a page. This is what people refer to as that data, information, knowledge, and wisdom pyramid. And of course, what we're trying to do for the business is lift them up out of living only with data to living with information, knowledge, and wisdom. And I had a quick example there yesterday, and I'll try to repeat that. So if we were to take this pyramid going up, data, an example of data, an attribute of data could be something like red. Okay, reds you'll see it in a column in the database or in the table or the data set, you'll see red. Now, when we add information to that, for example, metadata and contextual information, the answer would be, or the information piece would be, say, the upcoming traffic light is red. I was about to say robot, but then realized that that with AI is becoming a whole new different ballgame. So let's stop using the term robot and we'll call it a traffic light. So the upcoming traffic light is red. That's at an information level. And at a knowledge level, to explain that, to say, I have knowledge that the experience and knowledge that I've developed is that if I don't stop at this red traffic light, there's a good possibility that I can cause an accident. That knowledge may be challenged lately, and I'm sure you guys have seen some of the challenges we're facing. But typically, red robot, you need to be careful and possibly not go through. And then when we were to take it up into wisdom, it would be something like this, is what I've seen and experienced in the past, that because it's raining and because I'm riding on a motorbike, if I was to brake too late, I could probably hit the white lines and skid through the intersection. So I probably couldn't stop. So from a wisdom point of view, it would then be, okay, you better start slowing down now before you hit those white lines. So can you see the progression of knowledge and wisdom that you're developing? And all of this should be going back into the database or the data lake or whatever it is that we're finding, and we need to almost build up this path and help people develop knowledge and wisdom for whatever data set they're working on. Any questions on that?
No questions on that yet.
Okay.
But I can see how it's way more useful to be at the top than at the bottom.
Yeah. The red is, and I mean, you can see things like at 100,000 and all those type of things where we just keep on building. All right. So then the other aspect of important for companies and professionals, and I'm not going to, so this was example of we would ask questions in terms of where your company is. That's not what we're doing today. But I just wanted to share with you as these are the typical stages or phases that your company goes through. Initially, lots of companies, and they can sit between this disabled and enabled depending on data sets within the organization. And we would be disabled if you constantly heard this to say, the report said the road is congested. I don't believe it. Let me try. And to your peril sometimes, but sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. Other times you go on a tangent or an expedition, and then everything was fine. The road wasn't congested. Then you get more frustrated. We then go into data enabled, where people start seeing the value. They understand the as is. So an example of that would be to say, the report said the road is congested, we better leave early. And when you get to data led, then you got predictions coming through and you're starting to trust the predictions. So it's not just saying that I do predictions, but people trust the predictions. People trust what those predictions are saying. So an example of that is the report says it's going to take 4 hours longer. We need to leave 4 hours earlier. I think we will be hard pushed on that one, but you get the idea of we're predicting that it's going to take 4 hours. We don't know 100%, but there's our prediction. Data driven is the decisions now that are being made are dependent on data. Transformation is a consequence of data. So a simple example says the report is saying we need to turn left to get there on time, so we need to turn left. That's almost, people use this context of a pivot, when you pivot the business. So and a pivot means you're standing sort of in one foot on where you currently, and then you're taking a step to the left or right, to whatever angle to incorporate what's happening or what the transformation requires. And then knowledge driven is certain decisions and actions are delegated, allowing you've got enough knowledge and semantics within that machine learning environment, and they are helping us make decisions and actions. And then also we're using knowledge to filter data. So we're reducing all of the possible connections and correlations and combinations with knowledge, with specific knowledge graphs and ontologies and that, and we're filtering it to really be specialized in what actions we are taking. So this is a journey that we need to be taking all our companies along to provide better value. Everyone comfortable with that? Now, this is something that was published by the CDO Playbook and also by Carolyn Carruthers and Peter Jackson, and they're referring to it as D3, and they really just take us up to data driven, and we're now starting to see the knowledge driven aspect of it coming through. So this is a business transformation journey. Any questions on that?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. All right. So now when we get to, and I really like this side of it, when we talk about analytics maturity model and areas where we're saying, what questions can your business answer with data? So I think, and when we did this with the guys yesterday, we found that almost what happened, which is your BI, it's close to people sitting at 100%. And again, why did it happen? Are you using data to answer that? And we were sitting very high, and we had this constant drop off to this point over here where is data telling you what you don't know? And that was a really interesting discussion. We constantly had to keep coming back to say, we're doing, if I use this thing of, people are giving businesses the answer to a few of these questions at this level, but they're using the storytelling. Now, I'm not saying to you that storytelling is all made up or garbage, because people are using knowledge and wisdom, but it's all within themselves. So as an example would be, if they were to leave, can someone else come in and tell the same story from the data? And we're having to understand from a corporate point of view what is baked into our corporate memory and what is baked into individuals. And they can tell you just about anything you need to know, but if they leave, you've lost a lot of insight into the data. So the typical questions that we ask our business, or that we should be able to answer with business, is what happened. And remember, when we're in BI and we're doing descriptive analytics, our dimensions can certainly be who, when, where, and things like that. So those are, where did it happen, who did it happen to? Those can be answered pretty well. I don't think any of us are really battling there. We may be battling with the entire scope, so not everything can be explained and answered, but we've got a large percentage going on. Why did it happen? That's a level of analysis or diagnostic elements that we're able to do. What will happen? There's lots of us entering into this area. What should we do about it? Not seeing many people operating in that area and comprehensively in terms of the wide range of all the different domains that they're working on, be it claims, whatever area, whatever operational area. And there's an area here that they refer to as operational research, and I can share some of that with you. And then this one is that deep learning, self-learning analytics. Okay. All right. So I'm sure most of us are comfortable with that, but I really like this thing of when you need to challenge and lay a vision down, you're sort of having to address all of these different areas, and this is what we refer to as vision on a page, where we combining the journey, we combining the analytics continuum, we combining the analytical techniques, we combining this area of information, foresight, optimization, best outcome, and corporate memory learning. And here we're seeing techniques like deep learning, taxonomies and ontologies, building this image. And there at the top level, we see that DIKW. And then what people are constantly looking at is the time that it's taking them to observe what's going on, orientate themselves, decide, and act. And we're trying to reduce that time latency, understanding that this is the level of difficulty that we're dealing with, but here is the value and the maturity that we're operating at. So typically when CDOs put down this with this vision and maturity, it's all about improving the vision that the business has, being able to answer the questions, being able to apply the appropriate analysis to answer the questions and get the skills to be able to deal with this. Is that a good reflection of the visions that you have, or is this something that you need to be getting into place? Nishima, how does that fit with the vision that you guys have within your organization?
I think it does fit in quite well. As I look at this, I just keep thinking that I think we're so stuck on what will happen, and we are unable to move from that point.
I'm missing a really important thing that describes this area, and they call it an area of inertia, which describes exactly what you said. We're stuck in this area, and we're not causing movement, or data's not causing movement, which is this OODA loop: decide, act, orientate yourself, decide, act. Because we're not answering those questions, or they're not confident that they're getting the right answers and the level of detail on these questions higher up. Would that be an accurate reflection?
Yeah, I think definitely. But there's also one other point, that once you start to move to prescriptive and cognitive analytics, the value conversation also becomes a big component.
Yes.
In our data science team right now, we're looking at experimentation with data science,
Yes.
but we're struggling to prove value. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's also, we had this yesterday where we talk about when we do our business use cases, and then that drive down into hypotheses and experiments. The business use case has to be tangible in terms of the value that it opens up into the business, and you've now got a lot of work to do with the business to ensure that you're getting the right business use case to demonstrate that value. Otherwise, it becomes a academic or technical expedition.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think you've summed it up quite nicely.
Okay. ST, are you getting a sense of the path that needs to be followed? We may not all know exactly how to apply these techniques, but what is important is just to make you guys aware of is, as the vision has been set, as professionals, as we're defining this, in all of these different areas, we can break this whole transition up into different areas, and we can start showing our journey and the map that we need to follow and the provision of data.
Yeah, and like the end goal, like where do we want to be and when kind of do we want to be there and what's realistic to expect?
Right.
You can't go from data disabled to like knowledge driven in a year.
Yeah,
Like that's
I
not
like
gonna
that.
happen.
I like
That is
that.
not possible.
I like that, and I'm having to temper people when we do these data maturity assessments, and they sort of, most of us are landing up in these sort of areas over here, and they're setting goals for themselves of this area. We want to be data driven. It's like, oh, okay, maybe you've got to get these foundations right, and that's a very important point that you bring up, as we keep on promising that. And then we get into this Gartner hype cycle where we pump it up, we pump the business up, saying we're going to be here, and then only then they get into this trough of disillusionment, or the hype cycle disillusionment, and that's our visions are doing that for us. And then we battle to get up to this slope of enlightenment, and then we keep on slipping back into the trough because of this vision. So we can overcook this, and we can leave people expecting to be here and having all our questions answered.
Which it might not be that realistic. Well, not in the long term maybe, but not in the short term.
Yeah.
It takes time. Like this journey, this is not a quick journey. This is like a long-term journey.
Yeah.
This is like an organizational strategic decision. It is.
Yeah. And they've and what we shared some time back was, there's this difference between what they refer to as a first generation CDO and a second generation CDO. And the first generation is almost sticking to this area over here, just trying to get you out of inertia. And then your second generation CDO is this person. Now it's really important as a data management professional to say, where is the area that I'm comfortable? I'm comfortable with helping you transition here, but then I may not be comfortable with helping you transition there. So choose your organizations, choose your roles, and the area that you're going to operate in.
That's a very valid point. That is a very valid point, because then you won't make a promise to a company to say, I'll get you there, when you're actually just comfortable to get them to the, maybe like data led. Be like, I can get you there. Let's have another discussion and find somebody that can get you to the next step.
And my experience doesn't show that I've worked with data-driven companies, and now I'm going to take you to knowledge-driven. So when you write up your CV, where is it sitting? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's fantastic. That's sort of where we ended yesterday, and now it's this is the challenging part, is to say, well, what happens after the strategy setting and the operating model? And this is where the rubber hits the road, and this is where we start getting involved, where we've got the organizational needs. So we've done all this vision and strategy setting. Now we're saying, well, what projects and initiatives do we need to do? So we now need to talk about our workforce planning, desired capabilities, and then we need to connect it to the individual. Okay. So how does the individual support this? And now we're sitting possibly with the next role definition, the development plans, the needs, and we now need to bring the individual to the organization. And I was reading a lovely article today in terms of someone saying that this idea of goal cascading is wrong. It doesn't work. I think you may see a paper that I was reading over here, but so now we have a challenge of saying, oh, we got all these goals and everything like that. Now let's just push them down. Okay. And that's where where we come unstuck is people will battle when they get told what their goal needs to be compared to if they set their goals. So the effectiveness is changing, the benefit, and then what happens is if you try to force down, then everybody just sees that is, look, the only reason I'm here is to fulfill your needs, and I'm not getting anywhere. So we got to take a different approach to this side to keep it going. People comfortable with that? And I really like this when we as data management professionals, we've sort of been sitting more in the technical area. Now we've got to start understanding workforce planning, development planning, performance management, career development. These are areas that we need to start paying attention to.
So, Howard, is there a need to draw a balance, though?
Yes.
Or how do you
Yes.
draw a balance between what the organization needs are and?
Excellent question. Right. So this is how do we get this balance? How do we get this relationship? So that's where we get to our next step, and so we'll get there. And I'll answer your question a little bit later, Mishima. So hold on to that. Let's see in the next couple of slides if I can answer that one. All right, so then this is something that new term that's been coming along. We get our data strategy, and now we sort of wanting to build a data people gap. Paul mentioned it earlier. So I wanted to just check with you guys and get a feeling in terms of your understanding on this data people gap as to what do you think it is all about? If you were to vote as to what we must focus on when we put this data people gap together, what would you suggest? Sorry, and some of the options are quite lengthy.
Jonathan, welcome. If you could just please log on to what Howard's asking is if you log on to www.menti.com, it's at the top of the screen, using code 1554983 to also participate in the questionnaire, please. And welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to go for almost the obvious one for all of the above, maybe for like various different organizations. But I think one of the a big thing I think would be the individual goal to strategic objective goal. Like that's a conversation you need to have with like individual people.
And this is actually talking to Mashima's question. So he said, well, now how do I get this balance? And now that point that you raised actually talks to that, which says, happy you set your goals as an individual and we work with you in terms of career planning, but they have to be aligned to the strategic objective. Okay, so I'm glad you guys have got it. The actual answer is all of the above. And we can't miss any of these different elements out. And I'll on the next screen, I'll show you sort of how we go about doing this. So on the left-hand side, this is pretty much what we do when we build a data strategy. And this knowledge area is sort of sitting in between, but in the data strategy, we're defining our vision. It's similar to what we had on that vision on the page. We're now saying, okay, what are our objectives? And then what are the program initiatives to do the objectives and to get the vision? And then we start off saying, okay, we've got all these initiatives. What roles do they require? So there's a program, and we're now going to do a master data initiative as an example. And we now understand we need the master data role, we need data governance, we may need a data modeler, and things like that to make master data successful. And we then say, okay, that's great, but now we now start needing to connect the individual into this. And one of the ways of doing it is not having the backward arrow in terms of saying, this is my objective, link it to the knowledge areas. So I need a data scientist, I need a data governance, I need metadata. Here are my people that must fulfill that goal. And then I push it down to the individual. It's now about doing the other way around, where we align, where we say, okay, individuals, what are your goals? And then when you set a goal, please map it to a strategic objective. So you can't do a goal without a mapping to a strategic objective. And so you now force this connection coming back in again. So Mishima, does that answer that where we're trying to bring about that balance? So we can't just say, I like your goal, fantastic, that's it.
Yeah, no, definitely. It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now,
I think that's a lot where like budget, like training budget and like recruitment budget also comes in, because you have to like be able to put it back to the objective of the company, or the vision of the company.
They need to be aligned.
Budget.
Yeah, so almost your talent strategy in terms of your training needs to be aligned to your data strategy. So then one can talk about that, and then you'll be backwards and forwards to say, and this is what I had to do in a couple of customers when I built the data strategy. I had to then, in the operating model, I had to define, okay, give me the 5-year cost, and then do the cost benefit analysis. Okay, so how much is technology going to cost? How many FTEs are we talking about, the full-time employees? How many consultants, contractors, and stuff like that? We had to start building that across all the initiatives. Now, what's interesting now is that we see the initiatives, we see the roles, and what the level of detail we're now going into is that this role, when you define the roles, we should be defining what we refer to as a required knowledge, skills, and competency level by data management role. And this is this gap that we have in between here. And these come into your job families and your job profile. So now we have to work very closely with the HR people in terms of by job family, by job role, we've got this required knowledge, skills, and competency. And by individual, we've got what we refer to them as that's what they've acquired. They've acquired their knowledge, skills, and competency, and we can do the skills gap. So what's required, what's acquired, and we can do that. Now, I don't know if you guys, how many of you guys have ever looked at some of the HR analytics in terms of getting this matching to work. It's fascinating when people are putting teams together to handle initiatives. So it all comes from this bottom level where you've got to define what's required. You then, by individual, you understand they're acquired, and you do the mapping, and you say, okay, this is what we've got, and this is our gap that we're sitting with. So there's a level of HR. But it doesn't stop there for individuals, and especially for yourselves. You almost, at the same time, you're looking at your next role, right? So where do I want to go after this? And this is what is termed the desired knowledge, skills, and competency. And then we have an artifact that HR work with, which is our development plan, which says, take in the skills gap that we've got at the moment, take in your desired knowledge, skills, and competency, and then, of course, let's look at your career path. And now we have a development plan that's coming about. And, of course, none of this can really truly be done without some level of human capital assessment. I don't know if any of you guys have heard about that, have been involved in some of it.
I can see how this could be like exceptionally useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's kind of stating the obvious.
It is, and it's amazing how few of the people are actually paying attention to this.
Yeah, like our professional development plan should be set up for that. Like it should be like almost set up with, okay, this is my knowledge, skills, and competencies, and this is what I want to acquire, and I need to do this, kind of like have the development plan. Like it should be set up kind of like your KPIs and like your development plan should be set up to cater for this.
Should be expressed. So the data
should be expressed, yes.
Yes. And if we don't express it at the level, then we get into challenges where everything becomes a qualitative thing and not really quantitative. Jonathan, you were going to say something?
Yeah. Okay, for me, I come from many years of consulting. So generally in consulting, a lot of this planning is not done properly because you generally can easily, come up with the skills that you need. A lot of times we focus on just technical skills. Who do we need? We can easily get some people in with some sort of contract and get rid of them at the end of the program and that sort of thing. Yeah. So after that, I've moved into a corporate job, and a lot of this development planning is being expected from me, which is a big change for me. And it's trying to work with HR, trying to work with how you can plan properly. And also one of the first questions I started asking myself was, I'm joining a very big team. Why didn't they hire from within? You know what I mean? So for me, when I come in there, I'm trying to somehow come up with a reason why people are lacking the skills that were needed to take up the job that I've taken up. So you start finding that, I need to start putting these things in place, because previously it was a bit more random, where people are expecting some people to be self-directed in their learning and acquiring skills.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm trying to be a bit more deliberate, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here, right? Yeah.
Right. And there was a really nice paper developed by PwC in terms of where the trends are going from an HR point of view. And it was fascinating to hear every single person saying that they call them talent wars at the moment. This is massive. The people able to fulfill the roles according to their knowledge, skills, and competencies are very low, and those in terms of what the demand is, and they seriously having to apply a lot of data to this area, and that's where we refer to as HR analytics, to be able to do a much better job on this whole situation. So it actually, the formalization and the really amazing paper that I read was in the European Economic the EU scenario, where all of a sudden degrees weren't the same degree. So a degree in civil engineering a degree that was achieved in Croatia compared to the degree in Cambridge, these weren't comparable. So not only am I sitting with a situation of we don't know exactly what you qualified in, when you talk about your knowledge as enumerated in your certifications and your qualifications, you can't just say, oh, I've got a BSc in mechanical engineering. It's all the context and the area and where you got and things like that. So they're having to formalize this thing a lot more. And that's what we are trying to do now, is we're trying to take the entire DMBOK, and we're suggesting for data management professionals is, as you progress with your career and you progress for every project, then mark down the deliverables that you were able to do and get a reference for how well you did that deliverable. So if you're creating a data strategy, fantastic. Get people to sign off on it and give you a testimony or to give you a quality rating on it. And then you're almost going through the entire set of generic deliverables and processes and competencies, and getting and building your ratings. So your CV should look like it has got a whole lot of data, but it's now got to say exactly how many years, how many projects, what did you do, what were your deliverables, and what were your processes. Does that make some sense there, Jonathan?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yeah. Thanks.
So Howard, just to add to this, I mean, companies are still building these processes or this whole data teams. I mean, I heard the other day that I think BCX is just starting to build their team.
Yes.
And you know, and this all changed. I mean, exactly where I've gone in the last 2 years. You're understanding the data is sort of everything, and I've just seen all these new roles come up, and people are starting to realize, and it's actually probably one of the biggest change I've seen in the last 25 years. Is this all going to data, and then your data citizen, and data scientists and all those kind of things. So I mean, is it, if you had to say like how we understand the data, I mean the Gartner quadrant, I mean this is not over the hype cycle, or is it? And I think
your what we call first generation data engineer, data management, I think that's well over the hype cycle. I think your data science, or your what we refer to as second generation data professional or scientist, I think that's probably in the trough of disillusionment at the moment.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Howard, just to add, I was surprised a few months ago when I met a young chap, and he was telling me that he went for an interview at one of the large organizations, and one of the things that they were asked was, do you have a portfolio of evidence to show some of the stuff that you have achieved?
Yes.
And I think it just touches to what you are saying, that
this
perhaps
is exactly
maybe
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is what we got to do as professionals, because more and more they're going to call for this. It's almost the same as cinematographers, people who are working on movies and stuff like that. It's, where's your portfolio of evidence? I want to see what you're capable of doing.
Yeah, and I think for those young people that are coming from university now, there's a lot of open data out there that, things like Kaggle are giving them an opportunity to even build a portfolio before they even leave varsity.
100%.
Yeah.
This is how we structure our portfolio. And you want it to be in ways and terms and roles that are understandable within the community. So that's why we're working quite a lot with human capital engineers. At the moment, there's a company called PTES that we're talking about. We've submitted all of the roles, all of the things. And it was quite interesting because there's three of us, Veronica, myself, and Paul, that actually did these cognitive tests. Now, up until now, they've done all these tests, and it applies to all roles. And I'm saying, I get it, and there's a certain level that can, but I think we need to be a lot more specialized in terms of how do we assess people and how do we assess human capitals, especially when we get their career path. Because the number of times you ask people, oh no, I want to be a CDO, or I want to be a CAO, or I want to be the top. Now, can they make it? And we should never say that they can't, because of challenges that they faced in the past. Are they capable? That's where we need a little bit more guidance and help in understanding it, because what we do know for certain is some people are very comfortable and happy and capable of operating at very practical ways of doing things, and other people are very capable and competent of operating in chaotic or unorganized or unstructured environments. And not all of us can go and work in unstructured, or not all of us can do very well in very structured. So, even myself, when I'm capable of operating as a DBA and being very structured, but I'm more than happy to take on too much change that I should not be doing when I'm a production DBA. That's not my makeup. And so I should not be employed in those areas because of the way I operate. But we don't have enough detail, and we don't have enough understanding of where is what human capital people call it. They call it your flow. Where do you sit where you're not living a life of constant tension and I'm not happy. Either I'm bored or I'm stressed, and I got to know where my flow is in terms of that. So don't put me into an area that I'm going to get bored and I'm going to cause havoc, and then same as don't put me into an area where I'm under stress all the time and I can't deliver. But we need help in terms of trying to understand this in people that we don't really know, and we haven't had 4 years to understand, or we haven't worked on serious projects, so we don't know how they operate. And that's where we need the help. Any questions?
Is that something that people are like actively working on to have, like, I don't want to say cognitive tests almost, to say
we're running some guinea pigs at the moment, and then we've asked that we bring in a few other guinea pigs or test cases. So what we've done, and it's a challenge with them, we've given all the job descriptions and competencies from all the data management roles. There's 3 of us that have done it, and then now what we're saying to them is, I don't want you to come back and tell me whether I'm going to be a good data governance person or a good database administrator or a data scientist. I want to tell you where my skills fit. So compare the role, compare my skills, and then see what sort of makeup or what sort of fit I can do. So it's turning it around. Instead of saying I need a master data specialist, it's no, I've got an individual that's got these desires and goals. Can they fit into the roles and the succession planning where we're going? So it's been quite stressful. They said no, they typically just do it for a profile, and that's the way. But we're saying we can't do this. We need to match it to all of the possible profiles in a data practice, in a data engineering world.
That's very interesting. Thinking of, like, just for me, like, almost as a person and as an individual, to almost have that information about, or that knowledge about yourself. As well, to know, like, oh yeah, go for that, don't go for that, or do I want to make that transition? Like, and is it a questionnaire that you guys complete? Like, is it just tick boxes or conversations, or is it weird?
It's a combination of weird and tests and discussion. So there's quite a few engagements that we do in it. So there's a series of these things.
Cool. That'd be very interesting.
And the question that I always ask is, how do we set our career, especially when we're starting out with the interns? Mishima, you probably know this. Especially guys that just come out of university, and we start talking careers with them. They actually need 10 years before they start seeing their career.
Not really. I think maybe for us who are coming from the quantitative side, are a bit fortunate, because you can quickly see where you're probably fitting. Like, what I'm trying to say is, if you like risk management, I might as well just go the FRM route, right, and become a financial risk manager or something like that. If I've got a taste of quantitative analysis application in investments, then I'll probably go the investment route. I think the guys that really struggle the most are statisticians because they cut across multiple areas, and it takes a while for them to really figure out where should they be. Should it be in the data science, or should be in in a normal research in the stats area, or should be a normal quantitative role within a bank, and I can still do credit applications and stuff. So I think those find it a little bit difficult. But I guess the beauty is that they can transition across multiple roles. So the underlying importance is that they can fit across multiple roles, so they would be able to transition from one area to another. The guys that are coming from a computer science environment, we are finding that the trend nowadays is probably to move towards a data science role or route. It's sort of the fashion currently for more computer science students. They prefer to go that role until they get there and they realize that they don't have enough statistics, and it takes a while for them to discover that issue. So I think to answer your question, it's not an easy conversation. I think everybody has to travel a bit of their own journey for a number of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, to really start to see what is the best direction they could go.
Correct. Now, I think the level, it gets even more complicated when you start looking at these. So if we come back to this situation, so I like what you said there in terms of saying, well, I sort of know the area that I can operate in, but do I want to go to the managerial route in terms of setting all the way up at this level, or am I comfortable with becoming a thought leader within the risk area, or where am I as just a professional in terms of them being comfortable that not just a pure cognitive thing in terms of saying my brain is capable of doing it, but where do I find the most enjoyment as well?
Yeah, true. But I think most of us who are coming from the quant space, we battle a lot when we get to that level of management because, most of our fields don't teach us the soft skills completely needed to survive in that space. We really battle it. I think it takes someone with a strong mental and courage to be able to transition from the specialist to that management area.
And I think that's where we're trying to get as much as we can from, because this is part of the succession planning, right? We're trying to get to a point where we can show people a path. Unfortunately, what I do find is sometimes people are in the game for a while and then they just want to become the project manager, or they want to become the EIM manager so that they can. I almost feel sometimes they're influenced by power and not by passion, and so they start getting distracted as to which journey they're going to take, and then how do we get to a point where we either an industry leader or within a specific insurance banking, can we then start changing the way in which that domain works? Now, it's that longer path that I'm also referring to in this planning.
Yeah, true. But there's two also points maybe I just wanted to mention is your first exposure matters as well. I mean, where do I get my first job?
Yeah,
that will probably play a big role towards my entire career. And secondly, continuous learning that the company offers, which I think goes back to that discussion we were having regarding career paths and the route you should follow.
Yeah, and constantly that HR is constantly working with them. And the interesting thing is when I read an article today in terms of what drives the new generation or millenniums and stuff like that, and it's not bonuses and retirement and stuff like that, it's learning path. So many of them, it was about 60 to 70% said it's the learning path that I consider in terms of staying here or not. So Jonathan.
Yeah, I come from the technical background sort of thing. I was working in data for quite a long time, but I reached a point where you're working in a company and they keep pushing you back into the same sort of roles. So you're doing basically the same thing every year, and you're basically not learning anything new. So you might change technologies, but you're just basically doing the same thing over and over again. So at some point, you have to make that. I had to make that sort of decision where I felt like I needed to move into a sort of different role, and I had to go and look for some extra skills. So I had to go back to school, and that's what I did the past 2 years, 3 years.
Okay.
But I've met people. I mean, one of the I worked with many years ago. I met one of the first people who I would call like a data scientist. I met that person many years ago, about 14 years ago. And he was quite a senior person. He was the general manager at ABSA, and he was not happy when he was in that position. He basically wanted to go back doing a lot more technical things. So he moved back into like a technical role, and I was quite surprised at that point, because I was thinking, I mean, this is a very, very senior person and going back to a technical role, but that's for him, that's what fulfilled him. So there's different careers, different kinds of people, and the mentality that you have, and I've seen it work in different ways.
Yeah, and that's where we're trying to work with these, where we get what we refer to as this flow. And if you're operating in your flow, you can get to the thought leader and the professional and stay there. But you got to understand where things are going to make you bored or things are going to stress you out. And if you're operating probably, and he may be finding that this managerial level is either too bored or too stressful. It's just something, and he'd much rather be pushing his skills in a certain technical area, and he can be the best. He doesn't need to sit and debate, and he can dominate in that area. And that's how you're trying to help people find that way and not take them around the mulberry bush. And we always had this saying in one of the banks I used to work for, is you promoted to you beyond your level of competence.
Yeah.
Mishima, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, there's always a joke running around that no wonder many of us who are quant analysts, data scientists, and so on are led by accountants. It's because we easily get bored when we go to the management level, but accountants can justify the numbers and all those things.
Yeah, sure. And 100%.
Just another thing that I wanted to say. I mean, if I'm like on my LinkedIn, I'm quite connected to a lot of people who are like, chief data officer, that kind of thing, that sort of position. And when I look at the background a lot of these people have, a lot of them are not like technical background sort of thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are moving. And at first, I think I noticed there was a lot of people who came from like a marketing background. And when was still trying to sort out exactly what's the difference between digital and data, you still found a lot of them coming from a marketing background, but being a chief data officer, where they basically have not worked with any scripting, any coding, any SQL, that sort of thing. But they have not worked with the tools, but they are leading this sort of leadership roles. So it's quite an interesting phenomenon I've seen around South Africa a lot.
Yeah, well, it's actually worldwide. I'm sorry, I have to jump off here. I'm doing a CDO course with Calibra, and they spoke about first generation and second generation. First generation CDO tends to come from people that have got a lot of data management experience. Second generation is not so. It's more your statistical guys, your statisticians, and marketing is one of those areas that have been dominated by lots of analytics. And so now all of a sudden, the people that have those skills to answer business questions using data is what are leading to your data officers.
Oh, yes.
So it is, that trend is there. And then the next trend that they're talking about is when we were around, and Mishima is sort of picking up some of that stuff, is typically your accountants or your CFO takes over running the business. Nowadays, what's happening is when everything's been driven by data, your CDOs are now starting to walk into the CEO position. So those dynamics are changing quite radically as well. This is it's a fascinating discussion, and it's always helpful to know where you are and where you're going and what your pathway is. And thanks a lot for joining.
Yeah.
Thank you, Howard. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Howard.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.